The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.
Everyday Therapy podcast, where we discuss everyday topics related to overall emotional and mental wellness.
Yes, thank you so much for tuning in. We're just a couple of therapists chatting about how to create positive change with tips, stories, with inspiration for everyday life. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about who we are and why we're here doing this whole thing. I'm Jacy, a licensed professional counselor, registered yoga teacher. We all kind of have the same credentials, Julianne.
Yeah, so Julianne Schroeder, same deal.
Whitney Bunch, also a licensed professional counselor and registered yoga teacher.
And we're all at White Rock Counseling in East Dallas and in San Antonio. I work primarily with anxiety, not feeling any today. Right now, of course.
Tell us what deodorant you're wearing, actually.
I wore my real deodorant today, like aluminum, antiperspirant. I did not even go with the natural stuff today. It's working great, though. I'm feeling good. But where was I? Yeah, so...
you work with anxiety.
Yes, I work with anxiety. Lost myself there. Yeah, I primarily work with anxiety. We all kind of specialize in one thing and then work with a bunch of other things. So like relationships, codependency, spirituality, quarter life crisis, all that fun stuff. And Julianne, what do you specialize in?
Yeah, I do a lot of my work with those with eating disorders, disordered eating, those high-functioning perfectionists. And I think at the core of it, just people that have a hard time really recognizing that they're enough.
And very similar, I also work with just general anxiety, depression, quarter life crisis, identity, self-acceptance, eating disorders, body image. I don't know if I already said those.
Whitney's not anxious either.
No, not anxious at all.
Yeah, this is so new for us, so we're so excited to be here and just tell our story a little bit.
Yeah.
Like how we got into therapy. So I don't know.
Why don't you go first?
I can go first how I got into therapy. I'm going to give you all the PG-13 version probably because I had my own story. So my mom really exposed me at an early age to therapy. And I think that was super helpful. Like it wasn't stigmatized or like a bad thing. Like she was cool with going to therapy and like let me go to therapy. And so I was exposed to it at around 16 probably, but I always had really bad anxiety, but it came out sideways and like behavioral issues. So we won't get into all of it, but like skipping school, not passing classes, those sort of things, hanging out with the wrong crowd, all of that fun stuff. And finally, whenever I got in to see a counselor and worked through my anxiety, it all cleared up. It's like, oh, okay, she's not smart. Like she's got this whole school thing down. She's just nervous. So it was like, yes. Yeah, and it was a process. So like seeing a school counselor and then another counselor later on in life, and still see a counselor to this day. So it's always been super helpful for me. And all the little tidbits that we've learned along the way through grad school, through trainings and all that kind of stuff, and like seeing how helpful it is for our clients, it's so inspiring and exciting to see somebody come in just a total mess and come out the other side like feeling strong and empowered in that way. So that's kind of my personal story with counseling, how I was hooked up to it. And it's funny because I remember whenever I was graduating high school, and my mom, my counselor, my friends, they were all like, you should be a counselor. You should go to school for counseling. And I fought it for so long. I was like, no, I'm going to make no money, and I don't want to do that. And so I changed my major about 7 times and finally took this career class. And all the personality tests that I did said, you should be a counselor, you should be a counselor, you should be a counselor. So I finally did it, and I love it so much. So, yeah, that's my personal story with counseling. What about, does anything come up for you guys?
Yeah, no, I guess I'll share. And so, I mean, I guess I had the opposite experience, right? Where I think a lot of people, this idea that like counseling and therapy is only for when, like you're really messed up, right? And so, like I've had my own process of learning to accept that like it's okay to have problems. It's called like being human. So, when I first got introduced to therapy, it was as a teen, right? And, it makes sense that like I was used to holding things in, and so I found therapy just to be really just so helpful in the sense that I didn't have to pretend to have it all together, because that created so much stress, and that manifested for me in some disordered eating, anxiety, right? Lots of comparison, but just had to put on this face that I had it all together. And so I share this with you because I think it's important. Like I think a big problem in society is like, okay, like only show our best, right? I don't know. And so I think it's important and for like our listeners to hear that, okay, like even as therapists, we don't always have it figured out. Like, yeah, I know I don't.
That's for sure.
Right? I mean, I do know that I'm self-aware and I'm working on things, but like, do I have life down perfectly? No. Will I ever? No.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like a journey for sure.
Yeah, so I think like my own personal journey has made me want to be able to give others permission to not be perfect, to know that you don't have to put the mask on, that you can learn to like trust people, and that it can be okay just to show up as you are. So I find it really rewarding to be able to use like my own story to help others, and appreciate being able to share it now.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Similar for me, I think. I get that question a lot, like, did you always know you wanted to be a therapist? And it's very similar to y'all's story. I think in general, like personality-wise, like I was always really interested in my friends. The only thing other than a therapist that I ever remember wanting to be was like a vet, like just open heart, wanting to help, like caring personality. But I do always remember, like as a kid, like just being very interested in my friends, interested in their families, just kind of that curious mindset of like how people are, how they live their lives. I would spend like full summers out at like my friends. And like when you're a kid and you start like spending the night with your friends over the weekend, and then you start realizing like, oh, their family is like different than my family. And
what is this?
So just kind of that like curious mindset. And then kind of like fast forward, like pretty typical like adolescent. I would say my real journey into therapy began between like 17 to like 20. So that's kind of that like bridge between childhood to adulthood, I was like graduating high school and going into college. And I think what was going on, I got to college and it's like, oh, this is supposed to be like the fun experience. Like I'm smart, this is gonna be easy. Like I had my mindset. And the first year of college was like super hard. So I was like very anxious, and I didn't know it at the time, I didn't understand that I was like, oh, I had always grown up in a small town. I went to the same school, like kindergarten through 12th grade, or kindergarten through senior. So I was with the same people. I was in a really small town. I graduated with like 60 people. There were like 20 of us that graduated from kindergarten that had been together.
My gosh.
Wow.
So like a third of
You
these
knew like
people.
everything about these people, right? Like too much at times.
Right. So I grew up in like this little bubble, and everything was the same for a really long time. And then what I didn't realize is that the transition to college was going to be very hard. And I think I was feeling homesick and feeling anxious, and like the schoolwork was a lot harder. So I wasn't like getting as good of grades as I expected, and I think I started doubting myself. and feeling like, oh, like, what's wrong with me? Like, college is supposed to be fun, and I'm supposed to be successful, like, I'm smart, what's happening? And it was really challenging. And I think by the time the first year of college was over and I was at home for the summer, you move back home after the first year of college, and I remember telling my mom, like, I just don't know, like, I feel confused. Like, I described it as, like, a storm in my head. Like, there's this constant storm in my head. And I think what it was anxiety and depression.
Yeah, it reminds me of, like, your first headache whenever you're a little kid and you don't actually know what what to call it, but it's like, something's wrong.
Something's not right.
Yeah. So I had no idea what was going on for me at the time, and didn't really know how to put words to it, but I was like, I'd had friends growing up who had seen therapists, so I asked my mom, like, I want to go to therapy, and she was like, sure, I know a therapist. So we, like, go to therapy, and I like to tell this story just because it was, like, it just shows, I don't know, I'll just continue. So I remember going to therapy, and I had, like, no idea what to talk about, and I, like, get in there, and she's like, she's like a little older than my mom, and she's, like, so sweet and, like, welcoming, and, and she just, like, hands me the floor, like, so why are you here? And I'm like,
I don't know.
Figure me out. What am I paying you for?
To you. Yeah, so I wasn't quite there yet. Like, I didn't know how to, like, process or, like, develop self-insight or self-awareness. I was like, I don't know. I remember saying, I think I'm sad because my boyfriend broke up with me a year ago that I dated for, like, 2 months, and that's probably it.
It always goes back to the boyfriend.
And so being, like, the wise, skilled counselor she is, she, like, knew, like, she can see me within context of my life. Like, I just transitioned to college. Like, it's hard. This is a hard phase of life. She could see that I was, like, anxious and, like, hear that I was, like, struggling with depression. And, she backs it up to, like, well, why don't you tell me about your family?
We always have to bring it back to the family.
Yeah. And so naturally I, like, go in and I'm like, oh, well, I'm, like, giving, like, their names and occupations and ages. And she's like, okay, why don't you go over the next week and, like, assign animals to your family members? So I was like, okay. And I thought about it all week, and I still remember it. So this is, like, 11 years ago, or, like, 10 years ago.
Wow.
And it really opened the door for me to think about my family in a different way, and, like, what she was doing,
like,
she's
out of the box.
Yeah, she's challenging me to think about, like, my family dynamics and who I am and what roles we play in our family. And it just was the first time I really thought of myself within the context of my family system. And then eventually, we get around to, like, I'm seeing myself in the context of, like, where I'm at in life, and then I can begin to understand, like, oh, like, I'm transitioning. College is hard. I feel homesick. I'm struggling with, like, insecurity, self-doubt. I don't know what I should be doing. I was a first-generation college student, so I was questioning my major. I was in, like, the pre-quarter life crisis. And through, like, understanding that and having her help me, like, develop context and language for what I was experiencing was like, and then
mind blown.
Yeah. From then on out, I was like,
and it was okay to, like, right? Yeah.
Right.
Like it's okay to not have your life figured out at 18,
right.
19, 21, or 40, or 50, right?
Yeah, or 50, or ever.
Yeah.
But to always be trying to gain the insight and awareness. Yeah. Will you share the animals, or at least your animal?
Oh, I don't remember. I think my mom was a mother goose.
So it wasn't like typical Adlerian?
No. It wasn't the typical Adlerian, but, I had signed her. In that way, she got me to talk about, like, okay, my mom's personality and how I experience my mom, and how her being a goose and me being, like, a bird, like, how we relate to each other. And it was, like, that point forward where I really, like, started being able to see myself in that way and my relationships in that way, like, just more insight-oriented thinking.
Yeah. Like, what is the process of the relationship? Yeah, this is just an interesting point that you bring up, that I feel like a lot of, like, my new clients will come in and say, like, oh, I don't want to talk about my family. I just want to talk about, like, whatever's going on. And we'll get to this more next week, I think, about therapy. But I do think that there is something powerful in being able to understand, like, unconscious patterns that you learn from when you're at a younger age, and kind of how you start to cope nowadays. But yeah, and there's different therapists that kind of focus in on different, like, on more family stuff or more solution focused stuff.
Right.
But I feel like a lot of people think therapy is all about like sitting on a couch and talking about your family for years at a time. And it's not just that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that. Yeah. No.
But, so I just want to talk a little bit about how we all first met.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I just think it's like kind of an interesting thing. So we all went to UNT, and Whitney and I were in undergrad together. And then Julianne came in graduate school. But I remember, do you want to tell the first time that I met you?
I know that we met in class, and what I remember of it is we were maybe like pairing up on an assignment or maybe just leaving the classroom together. And Jacy was like, I'm about to go swim at the gym. And I was like, I'm going to come with you.
I had just joined the triathlete team, and I am not sports inclined at all. I tell people I won last place at nationals because I literally came in last at nationals at a triathlon. But Whitney was like, I want to learn how to lap swim, and so I took her to UNT lap pool, and she almost drowned. It was so sad. It's probably my fault because I won last place. But
what's funny about that is that between junior and senior year of high school, I was a lifeguard, so I don't know what happened to my swimming skills in that period of time.
Yeah, don't ask her about her scuba diving certification experience. So it's okay.
We all panic attacks.
You know, in therapy, we realize that like there are things that you can do well, and then there's sometimes things you don't need to force. So, girl, just have a life jacket on. It's okay. You make those for a reason, right?
The pool that I lifeguarded at was only 4 feet deep.
There we go. Yeah, you didn't need a lot of.
But yeah, as far whatever this one is, what is this? Breaststroke?
I don't even know.
Whatever. That one can't do it.
Yeah. I think that's normal. Whatever normal.
Tread water. I can
Anyways,
do that.
we're on a tangent.
So, and then Julianne and I met in grad school. Yeah. Do you remember what class it was?
Oh, it was our group counseling class, I believe.
Yeah.
No, and there's another class too. But
I remember hearing later on that Julianne thought that I didn't like her for the longest time, which is just so weird because we like lived together after that for the next 10 years, basically. Yeah. Or at least down the street from one another.
Yeah, we're kind of the same.
Best friends.
Yeah, no, but I think it's cool. I mean, part of this first episode is to give you a feel for who we are, because I think that's important. Also, I mean, I think we'll address this next week too when we're myth busting in how to find a therapist, but like being able to get a feel is important, right?
Yeah, the relationship for sure. Yeah.
But do we want to talk about kind of segue into like why else? Because I mean, we're talking about ourselves, and I get that we listen a lot, so sometimes we do want to talk. Yeah. Here, and maybe this is our like selfish like outlet. Okay, listen to us, please.
We never get to talk.
But no, actually, I think it's kind of unselfish motivations why we're doing this, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, like, for me, I see so many times I have a new client come in and I'm saying the same thing. You know, I'm going through maybe like boundaries or self-esteem or talking about anxiety or depression and all these similar things that I just kind of wish that everybody had this like book of how to do life a little bit. So yeah, getting to like a platform to be able to share that and invite experts on here to be able to talk about what those things are that maybe we didn't get that in school on how to deal with anxiety or self-esteem or whatever it is. But just kind of a passion project to be able to talk about those things, get it out there. Yeah. So what about you guys?
Right. Well, and like Julianne was saying, like just normalizing what counseling is, like what to expect. The next episode, like being about myth busting, like you don't have to be at your worst to like go to counseling and working on like self-growth. Like there's definitely this continuum of kind of like everybody, what is that quote? Not everyone has mental illness, but everybody has mental health. So at varying degrees, you know, it's totally normal for you to have ups and downs in mental health, and just kind of making that a little less scary by hearing us kind of like talk about it and how not scary it is at all.
Yeah, we hope that, this can be relatable, right?
Yeah, totally want it to be approachable and not a big scary thing of therapy, because I think so many people are scared to reach out, and that's like one of the hardest things to do is to reach out for help, for sure.
No action. And I don't know, I just think like when we are well, and we, you know, well in the best sense that we can be, like we just function better with others. We can perform, right? Like, and we can show up in the way that we're supposed to. So, call me kind of like an optimist, but like if everybody could pay a little more attention to themselves, like and take care of themselves, like I wonder how our world would be different, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
a little bit more self-awareness.
Yeah.
So I guess let's talk a little bit about like what it's like to be a therapist.
Yeah.
What do you like about being a counselor? What's a day in the life like of a counselor or therapist?
I love it first. At times it's like definitely stressful, we always talk about it, like sometimes it is work. Like you're going to therapy and it's work. As far as like the clients coming to do work, like it's not always easy or comfortable or like super fun to go to therapy, but it's definitely like rewarding, and I find myself feeling like very grateful and honored to hear my clients' stories and for them to like share open and honestly. And I enjoy kind of like being on the other side of what I experienced at 19 and have continued to experience in my own therapy, like just having someone help you like put things into context and like offer, like let you process and be that like second brain in the room. Like I just really love providing that like safe space where it's all about them and whatever they need to talk about.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, what do I most love? I love when it clicks. And when,
light bulbs.
Yeah, and when my clients, in a sense, don't need me, right? And I just had a termination session that sounds so official, but with a client today who's going off to college. And it's so cool to be able to see somebody step into their own strengths when there's a lot of battles and hurdles to get there. That's what's so cool. Like it's, from day one, I think I always look at my clients. They're viewing themselves in a different light. And so to see the transformation, oh my gosh, like it's just such a privilege, like you were saying, such a, and I'll get teary.
Right. We forgot our tissue box.
Yeah, right, where are my tissues? Oh my gosh,
we'll bring that next time.
Yeah. So I think that's what I love most about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that you guys said. I think from the get-go, like starting to be a therapist, just getting to like chat with people all day, like that's such a cool job, and it can be hard sometimes, and hearing some like really difficult suffering that, certain people have, and we've all been there, but it's such a cool experience to be able to sit with them in the pain and then, get to watch them walk out on the other side okay. So, yeah.
And it's just so cool. I know, Jacy, you've like recently said this, just the people that you encounter, like they're smart.
Yeah.
And like we get a lot of like naturally super insightful, psychologically minded people who have like the most impressive stories of resilience, and where you're just like so impressed by them, and we learn a lot, just from our clients. Like it's a two-way street, like
for sure
we're there to help them, but they're like little life lessons every hour coming in the door.
It's super inspiring to get to hear people's stories and see how, like, what their process is, because we might be like point in our direction, but they're really guiding their own story ultimately. So what's the day in the life of a therapist like?
Oh, my day in the life is everywhere right now. I part-time at White Rock Counseling, part-time working with eating disorders, teaching yoga classes. Yeah.
So you're at a hospital and then also do private practice.
Yes.
So.
And yoga and podcast.
All the things. All the things.
I'll think of something.
Yeah, okay. Well, each day looks different, which is good, because I think I've learned about myself, I like variety. But I also need to balance that out with some security. But anyways, yeah, so what does a typical day look like? I mean, I'll see my clients, obviously, but then I definitely want to leave room to talk with others. So I collaborate with dietitians for some, doctors, really in trying to provide the best care. But even, I don't know, I've been just compelled to take therapy outside of just the room. I mean, hence why, part of the reason why I want to do this podcast. But creating workshops and, teaching people, and I also do yoga as well. So, I mean, it varies from day to day, and I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that it's the same for me. So doing private practice and teaching yoga, I do a lot of mindfulness with my clients, and I've been I don't know, giving a lot of homework lately. And so that's been fun, interactive, outside of the therapy room too, to think of different ideas and stuff that would be helpful for clients.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I should say I like to read.
Yes.
Webinars. Yeah.
Training. Always having to keep up our education and training in that way.
We always joke that we never read fiction.
Yeah. No, except that y'all would be so proud of me. I don't know if I've told you. So with some of my friends, I'm doing a book club, and no self-help or work-related books are on the table.
Oh, man.
So, right.
That's a real thing.
Yeah.
What do we call it? Inspiration overload?
Yeah.
Wellness overload, to where there's just too many things. Because being a counselor, you're I know if I don't work out, if I don't meditate, if I don't eat right, if I don't sleep 8 hours, then something bad's going to happen. So I'm always trying to check my boxes, and my full day is just wellness, self-care. I'm I also have to work too.
And so fun.
Yeah, I'll have to throw some fun in there. I have to check the box for fun.
Yeah, no, but I think, we'll definitely do a podcast on balance and wellness, and how to that elusive, always coming to take care of yourself and fulfill life duties, and how we can do that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we try to do that, I think. Yeah.
I'm just curious for you guys, and then we'll go into some listener questions that we've had. But what, for you guys, do you all tell people that you're therapists? Do you not? Mm-hmm. What happens whenever you tell people you're a therapist? I want to hear some stories. I have a story.
I feel there's a few, we could probably make them into groups, they're the typical reactions from meeting new people and telling them that you're a therapist.
Okay, yeah. Are you analyzing me right now?
That's very common.
And they think it's the first time we've ever heard it.
Yeah. So very common, so kind of a fear, or a kind of a jokey, are you analyzing me? Are you judging me? Are you trying to figure me out?
But is it serious though?
It really would.
And I think there is an element of, well, yeah, in a way I am.
But isn't everyone?
Yeah, right.
We're all,
right.
I don't think by any means outside of the counseling room, I don't feel I'm analyzing my clients even. I'm supporting them and trying to help them build self-awareness in a way.
That'll be on our Mythbusters.
Yeah.
Not analyzing.
Never
but common sense, I want to kind of know, are you a person I want to be around?
Yeah.
Right. If I'm talking about dating or friendships, okay. Yeah. Right. With clients, of course I want to be around you.
Okay. I want to hear, what are the other groups?
I think there's the group of just well, what is that? I mean, especially even in the eating disorder world, what is an eating disorder? Because sadly there's lots of lack of information and knowledge about that. Not lack of information, lack of just social awareness, but what is that? Kind of the questioning, the probing, what do you do? Oh, is that this, or is that where you're normally getting
can you prescribe
examples?
Medicine? Yeah, yes. That's a common one, right?
Yeah.
So a psychiatrist, or a school counselor, or just kind of a curious response.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the other group is the Let Me Tell You My Life Story group.
Oh yes. Which, okay, I'm going to be honest. I'm a caring person. I can own that.
I can attest to that.
Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes they care too much. It's
It is a thing.
It is a thing, right? But I have learned that on airplanes, it is best for me not to divulge that I'm a therapist. And don't get me wrong, I'd love to help people, but like on that the red-eye flight in the morning when I'm still not really functioning, and you're going to tell me like these repeated traumas, and I'm sorry, I just can't do it. I just can't.
It reminds me of a doctor, you tell somebody you're a doctor, and you're like, I have this rash. Can you
diagnose me?
Yeah, I have this childhood wound. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
No, I was on a date with someone, and he was really excited I was a therapist, and somebody asked what we do, and he was like, she's a therapist. And the next part of the date, I did not talk to my date at all. They were just talking the whole time. And they weren't even, it was across the room, actually. So, yeah, I think that happens all the time. And I think that it just shows that, like, how much people do have that, like, heart that they want to share and something that they want to be able to release, relieve, move through, and find that wholeness, which is why we're here doing the podcast.
Right. Yeah. And I think the importance of really being heard and truly acknowledged, I mean, that is so valuable. So I definitely get it. Okay. I definitely get it. I just think there's a time and place, right? So like, maybe not on first dates, don't spill like your life story, right? Or on the plane, but like in the context of a safe room with somebody who gets it.
Yeah, or I will say I like whenever I meet people, like just kind of casually cross paths with people. Like I've, I even like recently like left a yoga class, and before there was like dead times, we were just like talking, what do you do? And I'd share that I'd was a therapist, worked with eating disorders, and just on the way out, kind of like started walking with this lady, and she, she's telling me like a little bit about her story, like the short version of just like, oh yeah, I had an eating disorder and I did this, and this is so helpful, and just like sharing like some inspiration. And I love whenever you kind of like bump into someone and they're like, oh yeah, like I've been to therapy, I know that world. Let me tell you a little bit about what I know.
Yes.
That's always really fun.
There can always be like those beautiful stories as well too.
Yeah. Connecting people.
For sure. Let's see if there's any more fun questions before we move into our listener questions. And so you can ask questions on our Instagram or Facebook, and we'll answer every time on here.
Yeah, and we'll keep you anonymous unless you want to be acknowledged. But oh wait, should we? I don't know if they're gonna zoom in. I think we have special effects.
Are we ready for the chat it up, Ziggy?
Yes.
Oh, let's chat.
Yes, let's chat.
It's called Let's Chat. We'll get that right next time.
Let's chat. And hey, we just want to put it out there in case you didn't see us from the very beginning. This section of time, like we don't want to advertise it as actual therapy. It's more so just an opportunity to start thinking and talking about things, and maybe we can offer some ways of viewing or tips, but we just want to make sure we're not misconstruing that this is actual therapy. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. And if there are, we know this is the first podcast, but we are live. So if we do have any callers that want to call in, what is our phone number, Ziggy, our technology wizard back there?
I will get that to you in just a second.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, meanwhile.
But one of our first questions that we got via Instagram was, do you guys compare yourselves to each other as in therapists? And if so, do you get envious? And how do you deal with that? Great questions.
Getting to it, right? All right.
So, maybe we should have started with something lighter.
No, but
I mean, this will be an entire other podcast in and of itself of like comparison and self-acceptance and like knowing who you are, and social media and just like the opportunity is out there so much to like compare yourself to other people, and that can just create a lot of like low self-esteem. And of course, I think that's a human thing to do is compare. So I know we all have personal experiences with that, but it's also very nice to have therapist friends.
Yes.
Yeah. That helps.
I think for me, I get more inspired by my therapist friends. Of course, I feel that comparison and envy in other aspects, but I'll see like Julianne like working on blogs and giving workshops and seeing a bunch of clients. And I'm like, yeah, go get them, girl. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go see a bunch of clients next week. Or, I'm going to write a blog post.
Yeah.
So that's really cool to be inspired in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say the same. And I think, for us, because we've done our own personal work, I think, we're less inclined to stay in that comparison mode. Or I guess I should speak for myself.
Yeah.
And
no,
so,
I agree with that.
So then, the answer is I get inspired, encouraged, and excited for each of y'all to do your thing and for me to find my thing, right? So we can celebrate each other's successes and not need to compare.
Yeah.
But I do want to make sure that I am being human and saying, there are sometimes some of that still comes up a little bit, but I can move through that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, like you said, Whitney, there's a whole nother podcast we can do about comparison. So that's a good question because it's such a struggle, especially in our culture.
Yeah. Okay. What other questions do you have?
Let's see.
Real quick, I have that phone number.
Yay!
Yeah, it's going to be 972-884-0816. And if you don't get through the first time, just call again. I'm watching the lines right now.
Could we put it on the screen, Ziggy? Is that possible?
Give me just a sec.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
By the way, Ziggy has been awesome. And
He's our tech wizard.
Yes. Ziggy and Anya.
And he's our therapist for the show.
Right. Pay him for that. For our reassurance.
You're doing great. He's giving us thumbs up.
He's a natural.
Back there.
Yeah.
So next question is, how do you find a therapist who can help you do the real work? The real work.
I always think of, this is my standard recommendation for people is read about your therapy options. So, there's Psychology Today, there's wherever else people advertise their therapy services. But to really read about that therapist and see if you're kind of vibing with the language that they're using on how they help people and what they do in the room. And then also a little finding someone who's specialized in what you're wanting to work on. So pairing up with someone, if you want to work on anxiety, finding someone who has experience in anxiety or eating disorders or depression. And then, I think therapists really try to put their voice in how they're describing themselves and their work. So read those profiles to see if you like it.
Yeah, for sure. Specialists, I think, right? Just when we can hone in on our experience in a particular problem, there's a lot you can get from that. But also, too, I think that's really important is, as part of the personality fit, and sometimes this does take a while to develop in the room, but finding a therapist who is real, who is honest, right? Therapists do need to be affirming, absolutely non-judgmental, always. And at the same time, also be able to guide you when, to have you, I guess, challenge you when you're ready, right? So whereas a friend might just say, yeah, you get angry and go tell them off, right? Right? As a good friend should, right?
But maybe not your therapist.
Yeah, but your therapist might be well, would that be getting you what you really want? Long term, okay. So I think it's important that, I guess long-winded way of saying that you find a therapist who is real and who you can become comfortable enough to be real with. I think that is just crucial.
Yeah, I think that speaks to what I was going to say is the relationship is the most important thing. So making sure that you click with the person as well as, they feel real and they have their credentials and maybe a specialty in the area that you seek out. Also, and don't be afraid to try different therapists.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people get discouraged whenever they try one therapist and they're like, oh, I didn't like them. I don't like therapists. I don't like therapy.
Yeah.
But there's a lot out there. And most therapists will talk to you on the phone and do a consultation, and you can kind of get a vibe from that. And I always give other people referrals of what else are you looking for?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you make a good point that I just want to reiterate too, is, it hurts my heart for those that like have one like experience with a therapist that they just don't connect with and they shut it off, right? And so like giving yourself a chance to like try with others, and I always say to my clients like, hey, I can't change my personality, but also like if there's something in therapy room that's not working for you, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you want me to be a little bit more directive, I can. If you want more space, like.
Yeah.
So
I think that goes to say too, like it's about you being real and you being ready to have those conversations, because it's a micro relationship that you're working on to help you with your other relationships. So if you can confront Julianne and say, like, I'm needing something different from you, like, then you can ask that of other people in your life as well.
Yeah.
So it's a good practice for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Also. Okay, next question. What is the biggest stigma that you come across in the therapy office? I'm not sure exactly what they mean by this question, because I feel like therapy in general is a big stigma, right? It's just hard to go into therapy in general. Like some clients are very private about sharing that they're in therapy, and sharing maybe about what they're struggling with. So right off the bat, how do y'all take that question?
It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. I think one stigma is that you have to be like completely broken before you step foot in a therapy door. That you have to be in that state of like, there's something so wrong with me, like I have to get help. So that's one. Or also just like a fear that their problems are not valid, or that they have to present something that makes a lot of sense, or have like a reason, exactly know why they're feeling the way they feel. And really that's like the whole point of therapy, is to like kind of figure that stuff out. So just coming in like totally open to talking about whatever comes up, and not feeling like and I think there's also like a fear of labels, like if I go to therapy, then that means that something's bad or something's wrong.
I'm broken.
Yeah.
I never encourage or ask this, but I think it's really cool, and I've seen this a lot with my clients whenever they can take ownership of it and share with their inner circle, like, hey, I'm in therapy for this thing, and it's just like very authentic, and I think takes away some of the shame around it and stigma around that too.
Yeah.
So
when it's appropriate.
Yeah, when it's appropriate, for sure.
For sure. Yeah, and I think, just wrapping up, and this is so cool that, like, we have people asking us questions, and we're so excited. We want to keep asking them. But real quick, I think the biggest stigma I see is just that it's wrong to feel, and, I guess, like, be vulnerable. I have a lot of, clients that, like, okay, everything's fine. It's fine. And, like, they're grimacing, and I'm like, is it really? And it's okay to feel, and not just the quote unquote positive emotions, but right. So
again, a whole
another
extra podcast of there are no good or bad feelings.
Yeah, for sure.
There are only comfortable and uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
Do we have time for one more question? Okay. So the last one is, when do I know I am ready for therapy? Now, like 5 years ago. They say for marital counseling, people come in typically 6 years, not too late, but after something's already been going on. So I don't know. My whole thing is like, why do you need to white knuckle it? And being like, why do you need to struggle and be in pain and suffering for so long whenever there could be an out? Because you're could be causing other damage too, as well. So, but yeah, I think anytime that you're seeking like just answers or tapping in, or just kind of need some strength.
Yeah. And, or two, just, you can be feeling like you're going like along, I guess, in life pretty well, but just want like that next level. Okay, like I feel like I want to up my game in some way. So kind of that growth-oriented wellness aspect. So you can be ready at any time, right? And I think something that's so important too is to know that like a good therapist will go at your own pace. So you don't, like really show up doing what you need to do at the right time. So.
Right. I like what y'all are both saying and agree. I think you can cope ahead if you know something super stressful is coming up. You can pop back into therapy. Like, you don't already have to be super stressed out about it. And I think it happens in phases. There's not a go to therapy one time, like when I was 19 and now I'm fixed. It's just, I went then, I went a few years later, I went a couple years ago. Like, you can kind of just cycle in and out of it as needed. It's not something that you're broken, you go get fixed, and then it's done. So you can kind of choose. It's just whenever you need more support or you are having life stressors.
Yeah.
Which come in waves.
Yeah.
So perfect. Well, that's all of our questions.
Yeah. And once again, you can send us your questions, comments, feedback. Find us on Facebook, Everyday Therapy Podcast, on our Instagram, Everyday Therapy Podcast, and on our website, everydaytherapypodcast.com. We're trying to keep it simple for y'all, right? So we are just so excited to continue to share with y'all the goodness. Do you have anything to say?
No.
Okay.
This was so fun. I'm so excited. Thanks for bearing with us on our first podcast. We were so nervous.
Yeah.
And now I feel like ready. Can we do our next one now? So thank you guys, and we'll see y'all next week.